Okay, lesson 3.1, what is ecology? Here we go. First, we're going to start with our lesson objectives. Three big things we want to take over here. Describing the study of ecology, explaining how biotic and abiotic factors influence an ecosystem, and then describing the methods used to study ecology. First off, let's go on to find some of these kind of science words. So describing ecology, we've got to make sure we know what ecology is. Coming on down here, biotic, abiotic. I'm not sure what those are right off the bat, so maybe we got to check out what abiotic and biotic factors are. Then we've got this thing called an ecosystem. Now we might have heard that in middle school or before. We want to make sure we check up and know exactly what an ecosystem is. And then the methods used to study. Okay, we'll check ecology, but we'll probably start off right there. Okay, so something to think about real quick. How is Earth, in a scientific sense, a living planet? Take about 5 seconds, just think about that. Write something down if you feel like it. Okay, so as we go through, think about it. Check out. Look back at your answer, or adjust it. How are we a living planet, and how are we different from some other planets in there? And then, if you want to get really big time, why? So, starting off with the first key, what is ecology? Again, think about that for a second. Press pause, wait 10 seconds, mark something down. And here you go. Ecology is when we are studying interactions among and between organisms and their physical environment. Organisms, as we remember, are all living things. Not sure what's going on with the pen there. Hopefully you can understand what all living things are. Organisms are living things. So, interaction of all the living things, and then this other physical environments, kind of the other factors that are around. Okay? Interactions within the biosphere produce a web of interdependence between organisms and environments in which they live. Biosphere, which we'll get to later, biosphere is essentially all the living stuff on Earth. Let's get this working. Okay, there we go. Okay? Down here, good old-fashioned food web. Okay, one thing I do want to point out and make sure we get right, some people get it messed up. Look at the arrow from the penguin to the seal. It is going from the penguin to the seal. When we are drawing food webs, when we make them, we got to make sure we are drawing from the source into the predator or into the eater. So the way to think about it is the arrow shows the energy flow from to in. So when the seal eats the penguin, the energy is going from the penguin into the seal. That's the way to think of which way the arrow goes. Okay, so you're always drawing the arrows from to. Here is one of the biggest factors that we're going to keep pulling back to all year. Organisms respond to their environments and can change environments, producing an ever-changing biosphere. Coming back to the idea of homeostasis, okay, of organisms, individuals, and kind of a homeostasis of our biosphere. Changing to maintain. Okay, so I'm going to write that down right now. Changing to maintain. And when I say maintain, is to keep the balance. Alright? If something drastic happens, changes are going to happen throughout the system to keep a happy balance, to keep everything sort of in check. Levels of organization. This is important. This is when we are studying ecology. We're studying the living things. We can study all these different levels. We can study individuals, which means I'm looking at one organism. Or you can look at a whole population. Population is all one kind. Okay? So a group of individuals that belong to the same species. So I might want to go to the Arctic and study polar bears. That's all one kind. All right? And they all also live in the same area. I can't go to the Arctic, study polar bears there, and then try and find some polar bears in a different spot and connect those. That's not studying a population. I want to study the ones that are all in one area because they all interact with the same stuff. Community, the different populations. See how I'm building up? We go from one to one kind of group to groups of different kinds. So community is different populations. All right? Think about, when you think of a neighborhood, you've got yourself, you can study you, right? Then we could study your family. That would be kind of a population, one kind, you know? And then you could study your family, how they interact with the other families in the neighborhood. That would be groups of different kinds. And then we come here to the ecosystem, right? Where ecosystem, you're essentially studying one spot, all the communities, right? And then the environment. And that's where we're going to come to this thing, abiotic factors and other stuff that goes on. So again, building up, you, your family, the population, the other families, the community, and then all of a sudden you roll into the whole neighborhood, how the street signs are, how the roads are. That's kind of the other physical environments, all right? So it's how the communities interact with what's around them. And again, we're in the same area. Building up above ecosystem. So ecosystem is one area. Then you've got a biome, which is ecosystems in the same climate. All right, so if you look up here, this is kind of a biome. Then we've got the continent of Africa, where you've got a whole bunch of different ecosystems. You can pluck out one place, one ecosystem, but then connect it to the other ones in the same area. And then when you take all the biomes in the world, so biomes, similar climates, similar types of living things, you take all the biomes, you get what we call the biosphere, which is our entire planet. Hopefully this word bio rings a bell, because you're in biology class, study of life. So biosphere, talking about the life, or talking about the earth, excuse me, all of the living stuff on earth and how it interacts with all the environments. Okay? Interact. We use that word a lot in science. Think about that for a second. And then think about what can organisms really interact with. Go ahead and press pause for a second and think about that. Okay, hopefully you did that. Interact. It's actions between, okay? So we say interact, it's legitimately studying how one thing is influenced by another thing, right? So the interactions is how maybe populations, how individuals interact, how different populations interact, or you're studying how one thing can influence something else. Now, what can organisms interact with? It's a good question. We'll come to that in a little bit. Coming back to our overview, flip back to that if you've got it written down, or just look at it. So study of ecology. Go ahead and mark down what we're studying. What I remember, studying ecology, I know we're studying different levels. So with this, I'm thinking the individuals, the populations, the communities, there are different levels of living things. And then also, I'm coming back to that buzzword there. I think we're studying the interactions. Oops, excuse me. With an area. Okay? So when we're studying ecology, we're studying different levels of living things, and we're also studying the interactions. Okay? Let's look at the next one, and we can come back and add this if we want later. Explain how biotic and abiotic factors influence an ecosystem. Well, again, we're back to this biotic and abiotic. Here we go, biotic factors. Okay? Biotic, living. Bio, living. Biology, study living. So think about that. Biotic factor is any living part, okay? And that could be the obvious ones. If you're looking at a pond, it could be the birds, the fish, but it's also the grasses, the trees, okay? Plants, mushrooms, bacteria, the microorganisms. These are the ones that are in the water and around, all the microorganisms. Then you got the ones, the subterranean ones, the worms and stuff that live under the dirt. Okay? So you've got all of these biotic factors. Okay? The food, the other animals, trees, plants, all the grasses. Okay? Abiotic factors, on the other hand, it's all the non-living stuff. Okay? And this is tough for some people because you've got the very obvious non-living stuff. Water. We know that's just a couple hydrogens and oxygen, non-living. Okay? You've got the dirt. Well, a lot of people will say dirt's non-living. We'll come back to that in a little bit. We don't know if dirt's non-living or not. Okay? The tough part for some people, because you can't really see it, it's not a rock, it's not water, is the other factors. Amount of sunlight, that's a big influence. Heat, precipitation, what's coming out of the sky? You know, is it humid, is it not? Brings us to humidity. And then wind, water, all the different sort of non-living external factors that can really change. Think about that for a second. How do these things affect you? When it's really sunny, how does that change your body? When it's really hot, how does that change? When it's rainy or snowy or dry, what's that do? Okay? Those are all non-living stuff that can influence how living things act. And then lastly, you've got these sort of in-betweeners, okay? Where it's not always clear. Pond muck is a great example, actually. So pond muck's kind of like when you step in, it's a squishy sort of stuff in the bottom of the pond. It's got non-living stuff. It's got sediments and rocks. But it also has like dead leaves, broken down plant stuff, and it's a food. Personally, I err on the side of biotic. I err on the side of if it was ever living, because it can still be a food source, it can still help build back up. But then again, the other side, it's not alive anymore, it's broken down into its parts. So if you ever sort of question like that with the dirt, the pond muck, the decomposing material that's almost completely turned back into the world, then you're going to think of it kind of as the in-betweener. I think this one Basil just said. So essentially, when we're looking at the environment, we have to really be aware that we are studying both the biotic and the abiotic. Your environment is the mixture of both, okay? So the dynamic mix of biotic and abiotic factors shape the environment. And I'll put this word in here again, interact, because they influence each other, okay? And when we're studying, it's very important. When we get to the research methods, if you're doing ecological studies in the field, you have to be aware of all these different factors. You can't just look at the living stuff that's going on, the biotic things, and you can't just look at one abiotic thing. You have to make sure that you take into account all the different factors that are influencing your study. So our methods. How do we study living things? We've got the stuff that's out there. I mean, it'd be great to be able to just pull it out and study. But how do we study what's going on around us, especially if it's changing around us? Think about that for a second. Okay? Before we go back to the study, biotic and abiotic. Okay? We've got this one checked back on the previous slide if you want to fill out ecology or if you want to add anything to it. But basically, biotic, as we said, biotic is all living factors. Now I'm using that word factors. It's a kind of fancier word than things. So when you want to say things, a lot of times you can add factors in an environment. Okay, those are your biotic. Let's change colors here for a second just for fun. Okay, and then we'll do our abiotic. Abiotic is all non-living factors. It'd be great in your notes if you want to put that and then also put some examples. Okay, write some down so you remember. Also another way, just if you want to come up with a quick trick on how to remember biotic versus abiotic, I just start with the bio means life, and then so abiotic, it's not straight bio, so it might be different. I try and remember that way. If you've got a different way, come up with it, share with your buddies. Okay, so back to the methods. Multiple tools out there, multiple ways to do it, but there's essentially 3 ways that you will always find ecologists studying. First, good observation. Just going out to the field and watching and recording and making good observations. Second, we can do experimentation in a controlled environment. Think about your algae lab. Okay, that's a controlled experiment. And then modeling. Okay, modeling is where we set it up. Also similar to the algae lab. Okay, here's just a rundown of these 3. Chances are you probably get a question that says, "Hey, here's a setup. What tool are the ecologists using? Are they doing an experiment? Are they doing observations? Or are they modeling?" Okay, experimentation. We're setting one thing up and testing something to check it out. Okay. Artificial environment. So again, this is like our algae lab. Okay, we are testing algae and fertilizer interaction. There's another fancy word again. Okay, so we set up a lab. All right, observation, usually the first step. And that's a fire drill. So we're going to step out. But this here is the rest. We'll pause. Okay, so hopefully that worked with the fire drill out of the way. Just a quick rundown. So experimentation, where you set it up, you set up sort of an artificial environment and test one thing. Observation, you go into the field and you observe and you watch. And observation in ecology, it takes time. It takes, especially if you're watching a big change over time in a population. And then modeling, you know, if you think of like architecture with the models, where they maybe take a large-scale building and make a small model to show what they're going to do. That's essentially how you think of modeling, where you've got this event that's big and long and over a distance, where you really, it'd be very difficult to study the whole process, where you can make a smaller scale model and set that up and get an idea of what's going on from your model, make it more practical. So back to what is ecology? We've got the 1, the 2, and describing the methods, we have observation, we have experimentation, hope I didn't spell that wrong. I always spell experimentation wrong, one of my hang-ups. And then we have modeling. Now, this key says describe. I did not describe those there. I listed. And so maybe in your notes you want to go back and describe. You list the 3, and then you want to describe what each one of them is.
All right.
And last bit, curious. Yes, there is a joke here coming down here with the Curiosity on Mars. If you want to take it one step further, think about this. explain what makes our planet living, and then what's different about Earth and Mars. And if you really want to get crazy, check out what's going on with the Curiosity up there on Mars and what they're finding, and if they're going to start classifying Mars as a living planet or not, and why. Thank you.